Student number to be posted on chat section. Where is the chat section?
Okay, good evening, everyone. I assume that all students are now in the chat section, in the meeting. And if you are in the meeting, please make sure that you've commented your student number in the chat section, as we need that for attendance purposes. Moving on, I've already discussed the WhatsApp group. If you want to be part of that WhatsApp group, please send me your name and module code to that WhatsApp number. Since I'm presenting various modules, it is important that I do have the module code. Then I'll send you that a link to join the group. Any solutions or session notes will be made available over that WhatsApp group. Guys, I'm going to move over to a few discussions. This is the first session that we are having on this. So for me to assist you most effectively, I need to gather from you some challenges that you are facing with this module, so that we can ensure that we have access to the most relevant questions for exam purposes. However, the first part of this meeting will be to discuss certain principles of auditing, and in a more practical sense, so that you can understand where are we coming from, and not just a theory-based session. So this is not a lecture or a tutor section, it's a skills development session, so that you can understand from a more practical sense what auditing is all about. Any questions before we start? And since this is your session, so please feel free to, at any point, comment or ask, and we will, well, I say we, I will try and explain as practical as possible, and let's see if we can get you ready for the exam as soon as possible. Any questions? If you have a question, you can just unmute your mic and ask. I can't always see whose hand is up, so you can just unmute your mic and you can ask. Okay, 100%. Let's first talk about okay, so auditing. What is auditing? So the main purpose of audit is to express an independent and
Sorry, sir.
yes.
Can I ask something? Where do I put my student number?
In the chat section, you will see right at the top of the Teams app, there's I'm going to put it up on the screen.
Okay.
So if you click on that button,
Okay. Now I get it.
It will open the chat section and you can just leave your student number there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
100%. It's independent and objective, and we express that opinion on the financial statements. So since we are coming into to a client's business and we need to express an opinion on whether that is a fair representation of what is actually happening in that company, we always need to apply professional skepticism or professional judgment. Professional skepticism means that if a manager gives you an explanation of why something is disclosed at a certain value, that we don't just take that as is. We don't just believe it. We make sure that we get sound audit evidence, something we will address as well. We will get sound audit evidence on which we will rely or base our opinion. So various sections that are quite important here. Okay, let's move on. So it's extremely important that you understand the two terms that I've just mentioned there, professional skepticism and professional judgment. And you need to be able to explain when professional judgment is required by the auditor, especially during the planning and performance of an audit. Because remember, there's a big section. We have a planning section of an audit. This planning section is basically divided into two sections. And if I put this in layman's terms, which I will try and do as we go on, is that the first part of the planning section is should we? Okay, and how? So the first should we part is first we look at the audit team. And the second part is we look at the client. So if we look at the audit team, we must make sure that are we the right auditor for the client? In other words, do we have the necessary skill? Do we have the necessary ability? Do we have the necessary resources to perform this audit in a manner that is expected, that would be reasonably expected from us? Secondly, and there's lots of considerations in that, I'm just paraphrasing here. The second part is the client. Do we want to be associated with the client? Is the client busy, or is the client does the client have a business in a very risky environment? Do they have the necessary financial system to provide a reliable set of financial statements? What's management like? Is there sound internal controls? In other words, we assess the risk of taking on this specific client. And once we've measured these two items, and we say, yes, we have the necessary team, we have the right team in place, and yes, we do want to be associated with this client based on various items that we've want to evaluate. Then we go over to the how. And the how is basically summarized as what are we going to be doing and when are we going to be doing it. So the type of tests, what type of tests are we going to be doing? There's basically two. We can do tests of controls or substantive tests. The when, are we going to be doing it at the beginning of the audit, beginning of the financial year, during the financial year, or at the end of the financial year? We need to assess the client's business and our own resources to decide on that factor. Any questions so far? Any questions? Okay, let's move over to internal control. Lovemore. How are you, Lovemore? Doesn't seem like Lovemore can hear me. We have spoken many times in various module sessions.
I can hear you, Charles.
Are you doing well?
I can't complain, thank you. And you?
I can't complain, that's great.
Charles, I will ask my question after you've explained the internal controls and the substantive controls. I have a question, but I'll ask after you've explained. Probably you would have clarified it by then.
100%.
Thank you.
Okay, so internal controls, it's very important that we must understand firstly what it is and who is responsible for it. So firstly, internal controls are the responsibility of management, not the auditor. So it is the responsibility of management. So there must be sound internal controls. Why? Because it needs to be able to produce reliable financial information, because that is what we are auditing. It must ensure effectiveness and efficiency of operations. So effective and efficient operations. And then very importantly, compliance. Compliance to what? Laws and regulations. Guys, just a reminder, I see there's very few student numbers in the chat section. We won't be able to continue with these classes if all the student numbers are not recorded in the chat section. So if you have not yet captured your student number in the chat section, please understand the importance of it and capture those or type your student number into the chat section. Highly appreciate it. So where does the auditor come into this? What does the auditor have to do? We've just said that internal control is the responsibility of management. It must be sound because it must give reliable financial information. It must provide for effective and efficient operations and absolute adherence to laws and regulations. So that is what internal controls need to deliver. And management is charged with the responsibility to make sure that internal controls deliver that. But we are doing auditing. So it's extremely important for the auditor to gain an understanding Guys, just make sure that your mics are muted. So the auditor must gain an understanding. So we will, in order to gain an understanding, we will evaluate the design. In other words, we will ask ourselves, what can go wrong? We know what the client's business is doing, so we know we are busy gaining an understanding of the client's business, and to make sure that this business is in a position to produce reliable information, effective and efficient operations, complies with all laws and regulations, we need to ask ourselves as auditors, what can go wrong? And if we've identified all the what can go wrong, also known as risks, we must be able to be in a position to determine, will these internal controls cover the company? In other words, will it mitigate the risk to an acceptable level? Because if it doesn't, then the financial information won't be valid, accurate, and complete, and will most definitely not be able to be delivered or produced on a timeous basis. So the auditor must understand or gain an understanding of the internal controls, and therefore we will evaluate the design of the internal audit, of the internal control system. So the auditor must understand its limitations. It must gain an understanding of the various components of internal control. So what components are there? What is the internal control system? What's the components? So the components firstly talks about the basic control environment. We want to know, what did management do to gain an understanding of the risk associated with the business by doing a risk assessment. We want to look at the information system. What else?
Control activities.
Brilliant. Who said that? Control activities. Control activities, and then obviously management need to be in a position to monitor. Adherence to controls. Everybody happy with that? So how do we gain an understanding, the auditor, if by looking at these items? The control environment, if we observe the control environment, we will be able to be in a position to see what is the attitude, the awareness, the actions of those charged with governance. In other words, we will be able to see, is the management that is currently in place serious about doing the right thing? And I know that sounds very basic, but that is what it boils down to. And the question will state it to you like that in the exam as well. Sometimes the question will state you have this young, vibrant, risky management. They like to take on risky transactions and things like that. Then you know, sure, these people are very more set on making profit than doing things the right way. And that immediately puts a question mark on the internal control system. Another thing that affects the control environment is if you step into a company, think about your own situation, and you see that the management that you are working with are not serious about a specific area of the business. Will you be serious about adhering to those controls? Say, for instance, you are required to sign an attendance register every morning when you go to work, and you see management never monitors that. Will you perceive that attendance register signing as important? No, it will immediately be diluted in value. So management plays a very important part in making sure that the importance of the control environment is communicated, even without saying so. What is the importance of a risk assessment? We need to know what can go wrong in this company. And then there must be controls in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. If you think about this whole COVID scenario, and we are working with a company that is very that deals with very sensitive information. Let's take a bank. What is one of the biggest risks? That client information can be leaked. So when we do our risk assessment, that will be a very high risk, exposing client information. So we will apply very effective controls on that area of the business to prevent, as far as possible, that never happens. So that is risk. That is what a risk assessment does. It indicates how big or what the risk to a specific area of the business is, so that management can act accordingly to make sure that the internal controls are such that it will mitigate the risk associated to that section. Then we move on to the information systems, which is probably one of the most important sections. All these are very important, but the information system is what will allow us to record and report transactions, for instance, maintain accountability. Whenever we want to make decisions, that information is available. Whenever we want to report, we will be able to do so. Very important, guys. There's still not a lot of students numbers in the chat section. I'm going to continuously remind you to please make sure that you comment your student number in the chat section. It is really very important. Okay, so let's look at control activities. So when you start at a company or in a specific department of a company, there must be a standard set of how do we do things around here. We call that standard operating procedures. So that will be the normal policies and procedures that will help to ensure that management's directives are carried out. In other words, that is your guide as to how things need to happen, and there's a reason why those things need to happen in that order. So very important that you understand that as well. And then obviously we would be monitoring controls. It is not so much adherence to these controls, but the effectiveness thereof. it is essential that where we implement controls, that management must be aware of a control's effectiveness at all times, so that if it is not effective enough, that it can revisit that control and decide whether that control has got a place in this control environment or not, and if it is providing a very important function, that it be made more effective than what it is currently. So monitoring of controls, extremely important. Okay. Any questions so far? So it's very important that you for the exam that you will be able to define an internal control system. So make sure that you understand that very well. More to that, what is an accounting system? We've brushed over it, but we've touched briefly on it. But an accounting system is part of this internal control system. What would you guys say is an accounting system? What is the importance of an accounting system? Anyone? Does no one know? That is very troublesome. Lovemore?
I can try, Charles.
Yes, please.
It is a system which is actually, I'm sorry, I might not put it in the actual words, but I'll try to describe the way I know it.
Any way you want.
It's actually a system which is used by auditors to record the transactions, and this is a system which they use when they are performing the auditing. So those systems actually, it could be like, for instance, it could be like maybe Caseway, it could be like maybe Pastel. That's the system where they use to work on the books using that software.
Definitely. So it is the system that will produce the set of financial information, and it must be such that it can produce reliable information. And so if you think about the accounting system, it is part of the internal controls, the information system, and is very relevant to a successful financial reporting. So the objective of information system and its subparts, for instance, the accounting system, is, as we've just said, is to produce information which is valid. Remember, we said valid, we said accurate, we said complete, and timeously. So that is the objective of an accounting system. So you guys need to be able to explain that in the exam. Okay, any questions? You guys are very, very quiet. It's making me wonder. Okay, so just summarize internal controls. You need to be able to explain those 5 areas that I've just mentioned. What's the purpose? Remember, an internal control system can have limitations. Be sure that you know the various limitations. Okay, then I'm going to go over to audit evidence. So what is audit evidence? Can anyone give me the definition of audit evidence? Anyone?
Hey, Charles, I would say it's information obtained by the auditor. I'm just like reading the definition here. And it's saying it's arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based. So it's information contained in the accounting records.
Definitely. So what must audit evidence comply with? It must be relevant. It must be. What's the characteristics of audit evidence? Anyone?
Must be sufficient.
Yes.
Reliable.
Correct.
Appropriate.
100%. Thank you. So it's very important that you understand why we are collecting audit evidence. So it must be sufficient, reliable, relevant, and appropriate. So appropriate is basically saying that I have audit evidence that is reliable. In other words, it is of such a nature that I can base my decision or my opinion as an auditor on. So that immediately must tell you that certain audit evidence are less reliable than others. For instance, if I collect audit evidence from a third party, that audit evidence will be more reliable than internal audit evidence. So if the management of if our client's management gives me audit evidence versus an external party such as a trade debtor, which will I add more value to?
I think the one from the external source will add more value since the management won't be able to tamper around with it.
Definitely. We would like to have information that is more persuasive, that is more reliable, more concrete. So definitely very important. So make sure that under audit evidence, make sure that you can clearly describe what is meant with sufficient audit evidence. That means we have enough of it. We have enough audit evidence to substantiate our opinion, to support our opinion. Everybody happy with that? So if we say audit evidence, we firstly say it must be sufficient. So we say there must be putting it in very layman's terms, there must be enough of it because we are going to base an opinion on it. So remember, the moment we give an opinion, people will counter us and ask us, how did you arrive at that opinion? And we must be able to produce the audit evidence that we've used to come to that realization or to come to that conclusion. And then that audit evidence that we provide must be sufficient. Everybody happy with that? Then we say audit evidence must be appropriate. What do we mean by appropriate audit evidence? It must firstly be reliable, and there's a hierarchy. And you can be asked in the exam what that hierarchy is. If we as the auditor develop that audit evidence ourselves, it is the most reliable audit evidence. Then we would move to obtain from a third party. So the auditor. In other words, if whatever we do as auditors renders evidence, that is the most reliable source. Then we will go to third parties. We will rather rely on the confirmation of a debtor saying, yes, we do owe the company this much. We would rather rely more on that than the company telling us that debtor owes us X amount. But then third parties, we can receive information directly. But we can also receive from third parties indirectly. In other words, it passed through the client's hands. There was an opportunity. There was an opportunity to tamper with it, to taint it. And then we will have information generated by the client. So I'm just going to say client. And that is probably the least reliable source. But the client can produce it through its system. Or directly by the client. So be sure that you can understand why that is, how important that hierarchy is. And then obviously we can still split this into whether they gave us written representation, was it written proof, or was it a verbal communication. So very important. Guys, before I'm only going to still discuss the relevance, and maybe when we will have our next class, since the hour is almost up. And then obviously in the next class, we will be doing more questions. I just want to get through the theory first. Before I do that, I'm going to ask you if you would, I'm going to post a link, which is a session evaluation form. I need that, the university needs that feedback for this session. So if you can please go to the chat section now and do that evaluation form, I would really appreciate it. And you will see that Teams has got a hand functionality. please click on that hand if you are done. That will be an indication to me that you have completed the evaluation form. It's anonymous, so I wouldn't know who said what. I will also be posting that link in the WhatsApp group if you can't access it via the Teams chat section. So I'm going to give you about 4 minutes and then I'll continue with the class. But if you are done, please remember to click on the hand function. As well, while I'm waiting for you to complete the evaluation form and click on the hand function, you can also click done in the chat section. That will also be an indication that you are done with the evaluation form. But I also see that there are not a lot of students who have posted their student number in the chat section. It is extremely important that you do so. Please, if you haven't done that yet, please also take this time to post your student number. Okay, guys, we can continue. If you haven't done the evaluation form yet, please do that. I'm just going to continue with the final bit, and then we will determine when the next class will be. I will communicate that to you over the WhatsApp group. So if you're not part of the WhatsApp group yet, please make sure that you send me your name and module code to the WhatsApp number that we've put on the screen earlier. So to conclude this session, let's talk about the relevance of audit evidence. So when we talk relevance, it means, okay, so In audit, we will be testing various assertions. So what is assertions? Assertions mean it is something that is, we test stuff like existence, valuation, measurement, completeness, accuracy. So when I collect audit evidence, it means, and I'm testing, for instance, the completeness of inventory. It means I must collect audit evidence that support completeness. Then it's relevant. So it's extremely important that when we say we are collecting audit evidence and we say it must be appropriate, we immediately think about reliability. And reliability is that hierarchy that you must know very well. And then secondly is the relevance. And there you must know the various assertions. So we will be talking about valuation, existence, completeness. What else are there? Something might be valid, accurate, complete information, occurrence, cutoff, classification. Those are all assertions. And you must make sure that you understand them and what they relate to. Because only once you understand them will you be able to determine if audit evidence is relevant. If I want to explain, for instance, existence and completeness. Let's say you are auditing inventory. So you're going into a car dealership and you want to make sure that what that client says is the vehicles on this floor, that it is actually those vehicles on the floor. So what is the first thing that you will do? Is you will obtain a stock list from the client. That stock list will add up to the value of inventory as at year end. Then you will select items from that stock list and you will verify if they exist. In other words, you will take that list and you will go to the various vehicles to make sure that what management says is on this list, that it is actually on the floor. It exists. If you just change the direction of your test, say for instance you select vehicles on the floor and you confirm if they are on the list, what are you testing? You are testing if that list is complete. You guys happy with that? So if I select vehicles from the floor and confirm whether they are on the stock list, I'm testing completeness. But if I'm selecting vehicles from the list to confirm whether they are on the floor, then I'm testing that the vehicles we say they exist. So that is why audit evidence must definitely be relevant. Otherwise, it will not support the opinion that we arrive at. Guys, I'm going to leave you with the following request. I would like to do as many questions with you as possible. If you have got access to previous exams, you are more than welcome to use that WhatsApp number that I've provided, but don't send it in the WhatsApp group. Please send it to me outside the WhatsApp group. So you just use the number and send it to me in a message on WhatsApp. The more exams I have, the more examples I can give you, and the more exposure I can give you to previous exams and to the exam that's coming. And I would like to explain exam technique to you in the next session as well, once we've gone through the theory. Everybody happy? I'm going to put up the number, the WhatsApp number again on the screen for you. Let me just share. Can everybody see my screen? If just a few of you can please just confirm.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so there's the number on the screen, please send me your module code and name to that WhatsApp number, and I will add you to the relevant group. I've already added a few students that's already done so. Guys, I'm muting my side. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask.
Hi, Charles. I just wanted to find out what is the format of the exam.
It will still be well, according to my knowledge, I'm not part of the admin side of things. I just do the academic discussions. Based on the current communication that I've seen, it will still be in the electronic format.
Will it be multiple choice?
It differs. It can be multiple choice. It can be list, for instance, the hierarchy of audit evidence in terms of the reliability. It can be explain the various control. The various items of internal control or the control system. So it can be list and describe as well as multiple choice.
Hi, Charles.
Hi.
When will we be having our next class? Because we're writing on Saturday.
I'm going to try and put it in this week still. That's if you guys can send me as many exams as possible, I will see if I can schedule one or two more sessions before Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Charles. As far
Hi.
as I know, the exam is just going to be multiple choice questions. Okay. Now, with regards to this is the second semester that they're going to have the exams in multiple choice. I just wanted to ask you, with regards to our we have a feel of what the multiple choice questions will be on topic 1 and 2. Can you perhaps come up with some sort of exam type questions from topics 3 to 5 to give us a feel of what we could possibly expect in the exam?
100%. I'll make a note of that. So you say topic 3 to 5.
Yes, please.
Noted.
Thank you.
100%.